Whilst much of Europe busied itself with either trying to compete in the dreadnought arms race, or at least buying into it in some way, the Royal Norwegian Navy was staying out of the situation, instead investing in a series of small coastal defence ships. Norway did not possess anything like the economy to afford dreadnoughts, nor did they have any particular desire to own one. But forces enough to make the odd cruiser realise it couldn't impose its will wherever it liked seemed like a good idea. This had led first to the Tordenskjold and then the Eidsvold classes, but both of these vessels had been built in the pre-dreadnought era. With the subsequent across-the-board increase in ship capabilities that had occurred over the past decade or so, by the early 1910s it was recognised that a newer class would also be needed. Whilst in some ways similar to the older ships, the two newer vessels, Björgvin and Nidaros, would need to be somewhat better protected and more heavily armed. As designed, they would be equipped with a pair of single 240mm or 9.45-inch guns, one turret forward and one turret aft, four turret-mounted single 150mm or 5.9-inch guns, with one super-firing over each main gun and one on each wing amidships, six single 100mm or 3.9-inch guns, and a pair of submerged torpedo tubes, one per side. Armour consisted of a 7-inch maximum thickness main belt, whilst barbette, turret and conning tower armour were all 8 inches, and there was a 2.5-inch thick deck. As the ships weren't required to move all that fast, they could be powered by vertical triple expansion engines, which used 4,000 shaft horsepower to move just under 5,000 tons of ship through the water at a maximum speed of 15 knots. Both vessels were laid down in 1913 in the Elsick yards in the UK, with both vessels then being launched in the summer of 1914. But, as it turned out, their launches bracketed the outbreak of World War I, and the British government decided to requisition all warships that were being built for foreign powers in the UK at the time. As was the case with other friendly and neutral powers, this was more a compulsory purchase than the simple seizure that attended the Ottoman battleships, with Norway getting most of its money back, along with a promise to return the ships after the war if they survived, or for compensation to be provided if they were lost. There was, however, admittedly, not an awful lot of choice in the matter. Having gotten hold of the ships, the Royal Navy found itself not exactly in any great need of a pair of small and slow coast defence ships, and so they began converting them into monitors. The changes, along with delays to allow the workforce to concentrate on other ships also under construction, meant that the vessels actually missed most of World War I. The modifications including relining the 9.45-inch and 5.9-inch guns to 9.2-inch and 6-inch respectively to allow the use of standard British ammunition in those calibers, the boilers being converted from coal firing to mixed oil and coal firing, and thus requiring the installation of oil fuel tanks. The 100mm guns were not mounted and instead a number of different caliber anti-aircraft guns installed, along with a large tripod mast which allowed the ship to carry the large fire control directors that were necessary for the main battery, and most noticeable was the addition of a pair of massive anti-torpedo bulges. That, however, was a choice that would come back to haunt them later. These changes in total, but particularly that last one, brought the ship's speed down to around about 12 knots. One unexpected effect of the modifications was the sudden appearance of the second longest range naval gun in the British arsenal, as the newly created 9.2-inch Mark 12 still had the chamber for the charge of a 9.45-inch weapon, and as a monitor it could be given a larger, or super, charge, compared to normal. Combine this with an unusual for the time maximum 40-degree elevation for such a heavy gun, and the weapons could reach out to 39,000 yards, which would be useful for bombarding targets inland. Renamed HMS Glatton and HMS Gorgon, the ships finally entered service in summer 1918. Glatton had the shorter career. She sailed to Dover in September 1918, but whilst there her amidships 6-inch magazine caught fire. The fire built quickly enough that the controls to the aft 9.2-inch magazine were cut off before it could be flooded, and there was a ship full of ammunition just over a ship's length away. Admiral Keyes, realising that this could be a repeat of the recent Halifax explosion if the 9.2-inch magazine went up, ordered the nearest destroyer, HMS Cossack, to torpedo and sink the Glatton. But the destroyer's 18-inch torpedoes failed to breach the massive bulges, which had been designed to defeat exactly this kind of weapon. Another destroyer, HMS Mings, equipped with 21-inch torpedoes, was then brought in, and it managed to put a torpedo right into the breach that Cossack had created. This succeeded in sending the ship over onto its side and dousing the fires as Glatton sank. A subsequent investigation aboard Gorgon found the likely cause of the fire had been shipyard corruption, as part of the magazine's insulation had been replaced with packed newspaper. The insulation was needed because the magazine sat between the boiler and the engine rooms, and it was concluded that hot ash from the boilers, stacked against the bulkhead, had likely caused the paper on the other side to ignite, which thus set off the subsequent fire in the magazine. The wreck would be subsequently partially refloated after the war and moved out of the way, ending up under the current Dover ferry terminal when part of the harbour was infilled. Gorgon had a brief but less fatal career bombarding various German positions in Belgium before being sent into the reserves in 1919. In keeping with their promise, the British offered her back to Norway, but the bulges meant that she wouldn't fit in the Norwegian Navy's largest dry dock anymore, and so this offer was rejected. With no one else being in the market for monitors in the early 1920s, her guns were removed in 1922, and the ship was used as a floating target before being sold for scrap in 1928.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.